So thanks again for choosing to spend your Wednesday evening with us. We hope that you'll feel inspired at the end and excited to connect with Toronto Ravines. So as you know, if you haven't used Zoom before, you can connect by using the chat function. And so if you scroll at the bottom, you'll see a little chat icon and you can click on that. And then you can select chat to all panelists and attendees. That way everyone gets the message. Because we have around 68 people with us tonight, we're asking you to maybe put yourself on mute and mainly communicate via the chat. If you can't, then you can communicate verbally. Then tonight's session is going to be recorded so that we can share it with the people who weren't able to join us tonight. And also we'll share it with you afterwards via email, and we'll post it on our YouTube Per People page. Next, I wanted to start today's session with our land acknowledgement. And so we wanted to acknowledge the land that we're gathered on and express our gratitude for its critical connection to the health of all. We're acknowledging the enduring presence and resilience of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people on this land, and recognize their role as caregivers, stewards, and storytellers across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the land where I'm meeting on right now in Toronto is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we believe that parks should play a vital role in providing shared spaces for all people and are an important space for reconciliation and decolonization. And so I invite you all to introduce yourselves on the chat with your name, the organization. We know we have a lot of community park groups here with us tonight. We also have Into the Ravines community champions and staff from NGOs. And then we also invite you to write whose nation's territory you're visiting us if you're not in Toronto. And we're sending on the chat a link to Whose Land and nativeland.ca who can help you identify whose nation's territory you're on if you're not aware of that. So I just also wanted to start with a quick little introduction. Oh, look, John from Friends of Cedarvale. Hi, John. Sorry, I know John, so I got excited there. But I also wanted to give a little short introduction about Park People, just in case this is your first interaction with us. But Park People supports and mobilizes people to help them activate the power of parks, to improve the quality of life, to improve the quality of people living in cities across Canada. And so the whole idea is that we think that when communities get involved, parks get better. Workshops like this one, Park People is hoping to support individuals like yourself. To mention, we have community park groups, park enthusiasts, the champions, NGOs, municipal staff, and really trying to help you in your work to foster healthier and more vibrant green spaces. So tonight's workshop is part of the Into the Ravines program, which we are grateful and honored to bring to you thanks to our partnership with the City of Toronto. So a big thank you to the City of Toronto. And Into the Ravine focuses on helping Torontonians connect and celebrate with our ravines, while also looking at respecting and caring for these spaces. And really that's quite a bit of what tonight's session is about, is learning about our ravines, what's important, and also learning about you know, the boundaries or the limits for a healthy relationship that we can have with these systems, so that we can enjoy them now, and we can enjoy them, future generations can also get to enjoy them. And so we have a really amazing lineup of speakers today. And what we wanted to do is introduce them all in one go, and then they can all start doing their presentations. So the first in a panelist, I guess, or a speaker, is Mark Sherman, who's a natural environment specialist with the Natural Environment Communities Program Unit of Urban Forestry from the City of Toronto. Mark's main interests are native trees and plants and the integration of natural and urban environments. He holds a certificate in arboriculture from Humber College and a degree in urban planning from Ryerson University. Mark joined the City of Toronto 7 years ago after working as a private arborist and for nonprofits urban forestry organizations. Mark helps coordinate community tree planting and stewardship and environmental education events across Toronto. So what we'll do is that Mark will kind of get us started and set the foundation on some of the benefits, the threats, and the ways that we can protect our ravines. And then we'll get to hear from all these different speakers that are going to talk more about how they engage in ravines. So the other speakers that we have with us tonight are Jenny Davis, who's an events and volunteer coordinator at High Park Nature Center. Right now, Jenny's most proud of the garden space she created for Grove Community School in Toronto, paddling the entire Mississippi River. Took 26 days, apparently, so a long journey, and with her family in August 2020, and her work that she does at High Park Nature Center in partnership with Taiaiako'n Historical Preservation Society. And so she's also going to be presenting tonight with Donna Powless from Kajuka from Six Nations. Donna is the director of Taiaiako'n Historical Preservation Society, THPS, which formed under the jurisdiction of Chief Arnold General Beaver Clan on Onondaga Six Nations. Powless is a researcher into Onekwe sacred sites, an educator and counselor who teaches Indigenous language, art, and has worked tirelessly for the well-being of her community from within many different Native organizations. The mandate of THPS is to protect sacred sites in High Park and I might need a correction here, Niwa'anonga Gai, which is what we now know as Humber River, or some of us know as Humber River, sorry. Then we have, in the next slide, Ambika Tenneti, who is a PhD candidate at the Daniels Faculty, University of Toronto. Her research is focused on recent immigration engagement in Toronto's urban forest. An environmentalist by training, she has worked extensively with diverse communities in urban and rural India in the fields of environmental health and education. Since moving to Toronto, she has volunteered with several public and nonprofit organizations, such as the City of Toronto, LEAF, 10,000 Trees, to understand urban forest stewardship practices. Her work with Toronto Green Communities River Rising and Lost Rivers program has helped her gain fresh perspectives on urban ecology, community engagement, and Indigenous land relationships. Dana Buchbinder is a citizen science coordinator at EcoSpark. Before joining EcoSpark, Dana researched citizen science with Ontario Nature, the US Environmental Protection Agency Air Research Program, and Delaware Stream Watch, with some intermittent seasons on organic farms. She's an active member of the Citizen Science Association. She graduated as a Master's of Environmental Management in 2012 from Duke University, where she loved buzzing with bumblebees in the field. These days, her toddler and preschoolers help Donna view nature from their excellent perspective close to the soil. And then last but not least, Cherie Daly from Friends of Glen Stewart Ravine. Cherie lives in the Toronto's Beaches neighborhood near the Glen Stewart Ravine, which is designated an environmentally sensitive area, which Mark will be talking about. Her children grew up enjoying streams there on many walks, as well as tobogganing and skating in the park south of the ravines. She joined Friends of Glen Stewart back in 2015, and since then has been involved in organizing events, attracting volunteers, collaborating with many individuals and groups to care for the ravine through stewardship, conservation, and appreciation. Cherie is also an artist and enjoys the outdoors in Toronto and in Muskoka as a source for her work and quiet contemplation and exercise. And so it's a pretty cool set of people that you have here with you today. So it should be very inspiring. One thing to note is that after the lightning round, you'll get to choose a breakout room. So I encourage you, as you're listening to the speakers, think about who might you want to ask more questions or have more conversations with, so that it helps you select who are going to be the 2 breakout rooms that you're going to be joining. Okay, and now I'll pass it over to Mark.
Mark, you're muted, looks like.
Sorry about that, classic technology. I just wanted to thank Brianna and shout out and thank you to Park people for putting on such a great event, bringing together these amazing people, and for the amazing work and energy which you put into the Ravines program altogether. As Brianna said, my name is Mark Sherman, and I'm lucky enough to work for the City of Toronto. Basically, my position is I work in a group that's mandated to connect people with nature. So I feel really lucky about that. I want to welcome all of you to this and thank you for being here and interested in Toronto's amazing ravine system. We're so lucky to live in a city that values public open space and invests in it. And a city that's developed in a way that retains some of that original richness and ecological health and beauty of this land and area. Okay, slide please. I'm going to jump right in. So here's a map of Toronto. And in the light green, you can see the over 100 or the 1,500 parks that we have. So it's the lighter green, and you can see them, they're nestled in into the neighborhoods. And the more prominent darker green, that shows our natural heritage system. And you can see that's some of the kind of key features of the natural heritage system is that they're linked together larger areas where natural processes can take place, like breeding animals or nutrient cycling. And most of these are found around our ravines and along the waterfront. And then within the natural heritage system, some of the sites are best, so some of the sites that are the best retained in ecological shape, so we'll get into why, are called ecologically sensitive or significant areas. And those are shown in orange on the map. So the city undertakes an inventory, and we then update that on a kind of decade by decade basis. And that's 4% of the city are those ESA or environmentally sensitive areas. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in 2012, the city identified 86 ESAs. And so they're biodiversity hotspots. And they're that because they have, or they're deemed an ESA because they have one of the following. So they're listed on the screen, but they contain a rare or endangered native species. That's either an animal or a plant. They're a large undisturbed habitat, meaning an area of Toronto that probably skipped over development during the industrialization period. And as a result, it retains that original ecosystem. It may have a unique landform, think of the Scarborough Bluffs, for example, or it plays an ecological role beyond our borders. So a bird migration hotspot, like Colonel Sam Smith or Tommy Thompson Park, for example, or it's a seed bank. So maybe it has seeds that are just distributed and by animals and support forests outside of that area. Okay, slide, please. So the definition of ESA, I use the word native to describe important plants. And I just want to talk about what that means. So a native species can be a plant or animal, and those are from an area, and it's always been in that area for a long, long time. So what's important to understand about native species is that they exist within the context of their community or their ecosystem. And so that ecosystem, it's super interdependent, and they rely on each other, but also keep each other in balance, and they make space for each other. And that ecosystem with those native species has evolved over a really long time. Slide, please. The converse of that is non-native or invasive species. And these are species that were brought by people, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose, but these species, they're not integrated into the ecosystem the same way. So they lack the ecosystem of where they are from. And this plays out in that they may not have a natural predator, so they might breed kind of out of control and end up forming a huge monoculture. Mono meaning one, so just them, and they end up bullying out the native plants, and the biodiversity collapses, and the ecosystem that was there cannot sustain itself anymore. So for example, at the bottom of the screen, you can see dog strangling vine, and all you can see is dog strangling vine. That's because it has pushed out all the native wildflowers and other fauna that would have been there. Okay, slide, Miigwech. On the brighter side, Toronto has a ravine system, which is a bastion of native plants, likely due to the shape of the ravine system being harder for human development. So if we think of a ravine, it's generally a landform that's in a V shape or a U shape. But the important part is that there's at least a 2-meter drop from the tablelands to the bottom, sometimes a lot more, but at least a 2-meter drop. And these were carved out by water. So the ravines are an integrated part of a larger watershed that stretches beyond our civic borders, but they play a key role in. Note that not all ravines still have water flowing through them. Some do at different times of the year, like at the spring thaw or during heavy storm seasons. Slide, please. Okay, so a ravine system, and I could do a whole presentation for this whole time about it, so I'm real sorry that it's one slide. It formed in the way that we see it now about 11,000 years ago during the last ice age. And many of the smaller ravines and creeks emerged as the ice shelves retreated, and water carried by gravity carved them out and took away some of the sediment as it did it. That carved out those ravines. The larger ravines that we know, so the Don, the Humber, and the Rouge, they were expanded during this process, but they existed prior to, and that's due to earlier geologic events. Prior to European colonization, the Toronto Carrying Place Trail, that ran along the Humber and the Rouge River. I'm sorry, I don't know their appropriate names, and they connected Lake Ontario and Lake Simcoe. So these landforms were used to facilitate trade and movement for Indigenous peoples throughout Southern Ontario. In the 19th and 20th century, Unfortunately, the land around the ravines were closed and buried in a misguided effort to improve disorderly nature. So I don't like that much, but it's what we did. And many ravines became homes to mills and dumps, farms and golf courses, manicured park, and even housing. Then it all changed. If you look at the side of the screen, that's the path of Hurricane Hazel. It hit in 1954, and Hazel dumped 30 million tons of rain in Toronto with winds of 250 kilometers an hour, and whole neighborhoods um, were just washed away, along with, unfortunately, people. That was through an act of the provincial government for the Conservation Authority Act, and they started to oversee the larger amount. The picture at the bottom shows a 1969 funeral for the Don. Unfortunately, the river, through all of this industrialization, was in very poor shape. And then it continued on with small activities until about 89, when the task force to bring back the Don was mobilized, and that's a citizen advisory committee. And so they helped the city, and then the city got on board and started investing capital and focus on restoration and investment. Okay, slide. The city did this investment and got on board because we learned that there's an understanding of the importance of the ravine system. So you're all here too because you probably understand that. And I'm going to use these categories to talk about the benefits because it helps, but they obviously overlap. So we talked before about the ecological benefits of the ESAs within the ravines, but also think about all the habitat that they support: carbon sequestration, water infiltration, water transportation, tree evaporation, which lowers the temperature for all of us, and pollution mitigation. For social benefits, we can think about the mental effects of being outside, along with the connectivity to our community, a place to exercise, a place to relax and be inspired and creative. And for economic benefits, obviously the stormwater management, but also the reduction in healthcare costs from everybody, all the health benefits of the cleaner air, the exercise and being outside. Plus we draw in more tourists, and we have day trips around Toronto, staycations nowadays, for all of us to kind of get to explore. Slide, Miigwech. So with all this engagement and enjoyment in the ravine, there's a risk of habitat destruction of the very things that bring us out there to see. So if you walk on fallen leaves or walk on logs, you could be stepping on hidden treasures, like my friend at the bottom of the screen. That's the redback salamander, and it lives under leaves, kind of by water, or delicate wildflowers. So that's those are trilliums, and you wouldn't see them except for that one time of year when they come up, but they're always there, and they're really sensitive. So ferns and young tree saplings as well. We think about hitchhiking on our shoelaces. Are there sits and do all that we talked about? Same goes for rover or your medium for these seeds to latch onto and get into the woods. So if they're running around, they might be dropping that stuff and trampling as well. A lot of these species are really sensitive. So if they're picked, they might be rare and they might be small populations. So avoiding taking any of that is a big win. Littering, I think we all know, is bad by now. It's just a bad look. And vandalizing trees, even if you're carving in your honey's name onto the side of it, it's no good because we're hurting and opening up the tree to pathogens. Also, there's some birds like kinglets. They have a really quiet call. It's quite beautiful, but we want to use our softer voice when we're outside. That way, the animals are able to communicate, or they're not startled off by our stuff, our loud calls and music potentially. Finally, if it's rained, the soil becomes, it's a really important part of it is all the air holes. If you step on wet soil, it's more likely to compact, and then roots have a lot of trouble getting through that. And all those animals that live in there can also get compacted. We want to avoid going in after the rain. Slide, please. Okay. So I know there's a lot of stuff that I kind of gave warnings about, but what I want to say is that you and I were partners in protecting our ravines. From the city perspective, we do a lot of stuff like planning, enforcement, management, and restoration. But it's up to each of you to do the other side of this, which is get out there and learn about the ravines. The more that you understand, the more that you're going to kind of engage and appreciate and be able to share them with your friends. And that's what we want. We want everybody to be engaged and enjoying these spaces in a responsible way. And do that by staying on formalized trails. You'll be able to kind of know, because often we have fences up on the side, but if it feels like something that is just a goat path or just humans have kind of walked in, or mountain bikers often, these are trampling over important things and opening up new areas, which we want to keep closed. We want to keep that for natural areas. If you find something that you like, don't pick it. Take a picture, and then you can share it with everybody. Tag TO trees so we can all see, because I want to see what you think is cool. If you want to take a closer look at something, bring out your binoculars to look at birds, or use your phone just to zoom in. If you have the extra kind of energy, we at my department run volunteer programs, so you can join us. I'll give the address at the end. Come out and plant with us. That's the only time that we really want you digging around in the ravine, because there's somebody there to help focus and just make sure that what we're doing is beneficial towards it. If you're going to have a picnic or play soccer, go to a tableland park. Make sure that when you're in the ravines, you're doing it for the right purposes. And if you do happen to see litter while you're there, take out more than you bring in. So I always leave with my pockets full. Unfortunately, there is stuff that just blows in. Do your part and make it even better than when you got there. Think about compaction. So we're thinking about when we're going into the ravines. And finally, just slow down and enjoy. The more that you engage and appreciate and notice, the more that you put in, the more that you will get out. Okay, slide, please. I just want to mention that.
Quick reminder, sorry, you're just hitting 15 minutes, and just to wrap up quickly. Thank you.
Perfect. Go to your public library. We have these guides also on our website. And that's a Toronto Biodiversity booklet. Slide. And so thanks so much. These are all the ways you can be in contact with us. And these will also be posted with park people. So feel free, get involved. And if you want to ask me any questions on this, I'll see you in the breakout room. Thanks so much for your attention and your engagement in the ravines.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for kind of setting the foundation, sharing a little bit of the history of our ravines, and then some of the actions that we can take to protect them and understand them a little bit more. So now we'll move on to the 5 other presentations that are going to be more of a lightning round and really sharing the different ways that our speakers have engaged in ravines or helped connect others to ravines. So we'll get started with Jenny Davis from High Park Nature Center.
Hello, welcome to High Park. In my 5 minutes with you, I would love to model some of the possibilities for creating engaging, meaningful programs from wherever you are in the ravine system. Whenever I'm planning a nature experience for the public, I ask myself 3 questions. First, what is the big nature in the moment right now? Or what will be the nature in the moment when my event takes place? Right now, in High Park, the big nature are the cherry blossoms that are behind me. About a decade ago, I moved to Toronto, and I would come year after year to the cherry blossoms. But it was only 2 years ago when I started working at the Nature Center that I learned about this bird, the Baltimore oriole. Now, the Baltimore oriole is one of the few species that actually makes use of the blossoms. They drink the nectar, and they also build these incredible nests. I don't know if you've ever seen them. So I learned about these 2 years ago when I came that year to see the cherry blossoms, and I looked up with my family. All we could see were Baltimore orioles. And we started to ask ourselves, were they always there? And if they were, why didn't we see them? We thought they probably were. And from that moment on, we say to ourselves, what are the other Baltimore orioles in our lives? So when I'm planning events, I actually use that analogy. What are the angles that I could talk about Hyde Park that no one's ever talked about? Or who are the voices that haven't been heard, and how can I bring them into the experiences that I create? Second question I ask myself, what are my strengths? What am I good at? And what do I like to do? For example, let's say you're out there and you are a yoga teacher, or you do yoga every day, or you love to dance. What about leading a walk through your local ravine and teaching people about, say, 5 trees? And at every tree, stopping in front of it and actually creating movement based on that. I'm just going to model that for you right now. So I'm in front of a cherry blossom tree. So, you might want to stand up where you are and pretend it's 2 weeks ago and the blossoms are out and they're really, really tight. Hold your fingers really, really tight. And then imagine the sun beaming down on you and your blossoms unfurling, welcoming spring. And I want you to spread out your fingers really, really wide. And then this morning, guess what? It snowed. And maybe some of your blossoms dropped. So you could, bend down, touch your toes. Kind of wild, but really what I'm trying to illustrate is the possibilities are really endless. Another big nature story of the moment in Hyde Park are the great horned owls. So they had 3 owlets, about 8 weeks ago. So imagine I took you on a walk throughout Hyde Park. So we're walking along. We come to a stand of white pine trees. Now, how do we know they're white pine? Well, we might pick up a bunch of needles that we found on the ground. We can rub them on our face. They feel soft. Okay, so that's one clue that it might be a white pine. Then I can count the needles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 needles, 5 letters in the word white pine. Great. I know that's where the great horned owls like to roost. Now, what I could do is I could take us for a little walk. We're going to pretend we're walking along the trails of Hyde Park looking for tracks. And oh my, what is this? Okay, so here we have something. Okay, it's a feather. It looks like it might have been from a kill site. And here, we've got something a little strange and unusual. Wonder what that could be. And what our jobs are is to really inspire that sense of curiosity. So here, if I knew that there's lots of families involved, I might say, what could this be? And then I might even ask my friend Owl, hey, Owl, what is this? No. Owl says that yesterday it ate a mouse whole. And this morning, all the bits of the mouse that Owl couldn't digest kind of coughed up into this owl pellet. And if we were to dissect this together right now, we would find bones, and those bones would tell us the story of what this owl ate. So in this case, if I was running an event about owls, I might even have people picking up owl pellets, and so that we could all be having a unified experience. Lastly, just to have fun with this, what about if you were really good at origami? Could you imagine teaching people over Zoom how to make an origami owl? And could you imagine how impactful it would be that for every fold you made in the paper, you shared one owl fact? Now that's a lot of owl facts, and it's also a lot of time to process those things and to have that experience so you'll remember. Lastly, my third question.
Jenny, we're just at 6 minutes, so just quick wrap up.
All right. If you want to know more about things, come to our breakout room with Donna. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Over to Donna. And Jenny, there were some questions on the chat. If you want to maybe answer them or just answer it on the breakout room.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Donna.
Okay. Scano, Sogwego, greetings everyone. Kanigiosta, Gayaso, my name makes water clear. Dewistawi snipe, Niwage Shote, my clan. Gayakono, Kuga, Niwago, Jote, my nation. Donna Powless, I'm director of Taiaiako'n Historical Preservation Society. I oversee burial mounds and sacred sites in High Park, Toronto. We are in partnership with Nature Center in High Park. I have done several nature walks at the Nature Center and art activities. We have done several events at the Nature Center, and we have planted gardens at the Nature Center and along the Humber River in High Park. We offer food after each event with traditional foods and medicine teas. We have 3 craft activities at each event, and we sing traditional songs and dances with hand drums and water drum. We have a sacred fire at each event, and our firekeeper is Joe's Two Crows. Catherine Tamaro is our graphic designer, also has done several nature walks and art activities. We had several ceremonies at the Nature Center, example, tapping maple trees and making maple syrup. The last event we did was a National Water Day event, March the 21st, 2021. Dr. Kim Jackson is our webmaster, coordinator, researcher, and she's on leave at the time. We also share traditional teachings about land stewardship. Programming and events are all open to all people. Thank you. Yahweh.
Thank you very much, Donna. And we saw some beautiful pictures as well. And now over to Ambika.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, park people, for taking Up Into the Ravine initiative. It's really wonderful to be part of this. We need more people to know our ravines, as Mark said, so that they don't just enjoy these places, but learn about them so that they can look after them. I'm waiting for my slides. Yes, thank you. So I'm going to share some insights from my research on recent immigrants in the urban forest and how it links directly with the demographics of a ravine. Next slide, please. So pre and post-COVID, people who do use the ravines would have noticed that There is definitely much more diversity in our ravines right now. More people of color, our communities are using our ravines. That is because they want to escape being stuck in the house and to get out for mental and physical health and well-being. So there is definitely an uptick in people who are using our ravines. Next slide, please. So who is using these spaces? In the pre-COVID era, and to me that it looks like an era, it's more than a year now that we've been stuck at home, majority of the ravine users have been white. They live in the neighborhood where these ravines are, and they have ease of access to these places because their houses are there, or the family and friends have houses that have backyards overlooking into the ravines. So they're just extensions of their backyards, and backyards are private property. So definitely it is a place where they belong. Whereas if you see people of color or Black people out in these spaces, people do wonder as to where did these people come from? Because of course we often do not live so close to the ravines that we can access it easily. So it's always a question as to who are these people? Where did they come from? Do they belong here? And what are they doing here? So that was the reason that is one of the reasons you don't see too many people in our ravines. So how are these people, next slide please. How are these people using these spaces? My research shows that ravines are places that are like throughways, like the ravines and the trails. You are meant or expected to just walk through or bike through. You don't sit here. So people use the ravines to walk for a variety of reasons. They walk for exercise, they walk for fun, they walk to socialize with family and friends, for health reasons, to de-stress. And we saw in the word thing that you did was so many people connect with the ravines for different reasons. They walk alone, they walk with family, they walk with friends, or a lot of them walk with their dogs. Some people use this space to run, to exercise, and or to bike, as I mentioned earlier. Very rarely will you find people who are able to sit there and enjoy the peace and the tranquility of the ravines that they offer. Forest bathing was mentioned as one of the terms that people would love to do, and ravines do offer that, but like this person out here, you need to stand there. Very rarely will you find a place to sit down, and you will need to make your own space to sit down. If you're comfortable sitting on the ground, that's fine. But even then people will wonder, why are you sitting and not just passing through the place? Next slide, please. So since my work is on immigrants, and I have questioned a lot of immigrants as to why do they not use these ravines? And it's not that they don't want to use these ravines, especially like Toronto's population, 51.5% or more than 51.5% of Torontonians are people of color. Immigrant communities are more than 48, around 48%. So there is a definite visible minority that is a big chunk of our population, but that population is not reflected in our diversities, in our green spaces, but you can see them in our parks. People of color use these spaces, avoid the ravines, not because they don't want to go there, but because of preferences, access, and fear. They prefer city parks where they can sit down and enjoy a picnic, with large gatherings of family and friends. They can be together. They lack the time and the leisure to go out for regular walks. So they prefer to organize these big social events where they can be together. Ravines lack facilities, unfortunately. And therefore, also they're not spaces that people are comfortable going, especially if they're multi-generational families. People have reported that if you have children or older people with you, you need to have toilet facilities. So ravines are not the option for many people. They prefer clean and well-maintained places because that suggests there is municipal oversight, that the city is constantly there, the space is not neglected, and it's safe to be in this space. Access is also restricted through physical barriers, through economic barriers, and access is also, we don't think of it much, but there are communicative barriers. People don't know that these places exist. In my research during the focus groups, like people question, like, what is a ravine? I don't know if I live close to a ravine. So it's not that they know it and they don't go there, it's that they don't know. And there is this problem where organizations are not doing enough outreach to these communities. Ravines have been neglected spaces for use. People who live close to it or biking communities use those spaces. Sports communities use those spaces, but not people who don't live close to them. The other barrier that came out was fear. A lot of people have the stereotype that immigrants do not know these spaces. They don't go there because they fear that there are bears in these places. But my research shows that no, it's not the bears that they're scared of, but it is the fear of the unknown. People have said we don't know how to identify ticks or the poison ivy or the giant hogweed. And in the spring and summer, there's so many reports of people getting affected by it that it becomes difficult. There is a fear of stranger danger, and there are psychological barriers of not being welcomed in these spaces. The last slide is just my contact. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ambika. And now I'm going to pass it over to Dana.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I've learned a lot already from the speakers, and I'm very honored to be here. Next slide, please. I'm Dana Buchbinder, and at EcoSpark, we empower people to protect and sustain the local environment. And we do this through the programs of Discover, Act, and Change that are taking place in a typical year in person, often with schools, so grades 6 through 12 in the Greater Toronto Area. And then through the pandemic, we've been connecting virtually with a lot of schools and our park volunteers as well. We've worked with for many years, trying to get people to get off screen and get outside and use some of the tools on their own, but then share them with others with the virtual community. Next slide, please. So to take a little snapshot of what these programs might look like, our Changing Currents program, in a typical year, the students are actually getting into the streams to collect really important environmental data that's shared throughout Ontario. And we have the students actually view their own data that they're collecting so they can monitor change over time. We have a school watch program. That's what I'm mostly involved with. So even right on their school grounds, there's a lot of schools that are bordering the ravines, in the ravines, able to take walking field trips to go and explore with their teachers. So we work on curriculum links to make a lot of the ecology topics relevant for teachers and show teachers how it's possible to take a science class out and gather some meaningful information about birds that they might find on the school grounds. Our Park Watch program has been involved with the Community Stewardship program through City of Toronto. For a few years, we were looking at invasive species. There's other park groups that we're really happy to engage with and learn more from, including that hands-on stewardship and what we can do to help support the ravines, no matter where we are. And our Greenbelt program is very active right now. We've got very inspiring students in high school and post-secondary students and beyond who are advocating for the Greenbelt, for like this big green lung that is supporting our ravines and giving us all of our fresh air and fresh water upstream of us. So hurrah for the students, and I encourage you to check out ecospark.ca to learn more. Next slide, please. I am an advocate for people to value their own observations of nature. So I'd ask if you could share in the chat with everybody, what's something that you've noticed? It could be a nature observation from Toronto's ravines or anything from nearby nature. Cherry blossoms or something that people might turn to, but it could be something as simple as a dandelion that blooms outside of your home and signs of spring. So if anybody wants to, please share in the chat. And we'll keep that chat going as we continue here. Thank you. Next slide, please. Awesome, red-breasted blackbirds. Yeah, there's red-winged blackbird on my slide, yay. So we have been seeing a lot of activities as people are waking up for spring, they're thinking about Earth Day. All of these activities, even if it's just noting what it is that you've seen in nature in your own wanders, can be contributed to citizen science. Another word for this is community science. It means a citizen of the world studying nearby nature together. So what we like to do is sort of introduce people some tools that are available. Pardon? To introduce some tools that are available for anybody to ask questions about the world around us, explore and test their own hypotheses, and maybe learn a little bit more about water quality or pollinators or whatever it is that interests them as we all work together to help solve some of these local and global problems. A few examples with the ravines would be flagging invasive species. So even if you aren't part of that volunteer team, to remove them, and you can do important work to note where those problem plants, for example, might be located. Tracking biodiversity and celebrating it, addressing climate change. Next slide, please. Oh, cool, people are seeing garter snakes already, that's exciting. So this is an example of a couple of the tools. One of them would be in an app form. We have an upcoming event called the City Nature Challenge, which I'll tell you more about, but anybody is welcome to contribute to that throughout the Greater Toronto Area. It's part of a global BioBlitz effort to try and tally nature observations, looking for 1 million observations within 4 days this year. So really a huge global effort to look at what's outside. Next slide, please. And finally, we offer a few different tools online that help you explore any of the community data. So all the data points on the maps that we present are gathered by volunteers and then shared back with a few tools to help interpret them and say, what does it mean that I saw a caterpillar yesterday? What does it mean that somebody else noticed some birds migrating earlier? All of the questions that we might have, looking to explore them a bit more. Thanks, Holly shared the link for City Nature Challenge in the chat. And I hope to talk with you a bit more and learn from you this evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dana. And then last but not least, Cherie.
Hi, Brianna. Thank you very much. So you can see my picture behind me that I managed to figure out how to do is actually Muskoka. So I do like both being in the ravine near my home and in the outdoors here. Friends of Glen Stewart Ravine is the group that I've been a part of since about 2015. This is our website, but we don't use it very much, so it's probably not a good idea to check it out. I'm going to talk a bit just about how our group has organized and what we've done as events. We're a totally volunteer-led group. Next slide. Just a little background, and I think Mark talked a bit about the ravines beginning about 10,000 years ago, I think. But in about 1931, the land where Glen Stewart Ravine was donated as park, and it's grown since to be about 8.5 hectares. It's also an environmentally sensitive area, partly because of some of the plants that are there. And it's also a flyway for birds. I think I read that there were 110 types of birds that go through there in the spring. We also do have a ravine management plan. So a couple of things. Because we're an environmentally sensitive area, we're somewhat restricted in what we as volunteers can do without city supervision. And also because it does have a management plan, the city has been very generous in, they have an annual list of things they do. I think this year they're planting something in the neighborhood of 500 trees, native trees in areas where they've removed invasive species. So our group was started just by 2 people who loved the ravine and wanted to keep it for other families like theirs had. They went ahead and developed some logo and goals, a website and a Facebook page, but they really didn't do much beyond that. Next slide. This is just so you can get an idea of what it looks like. We do have a creek that runs through it that's spring fed. There's quite a few trees you can see knocked over. It also does have those stairs that were in Ambika's slide that people do use for exercise. Next slide. So this just shows you what we came up with. It's pretty basic, I guess, but we had a logo, Friends of Glen Stewart Ravine with the tree, the color green. And the things that were important were stewardship, conservancy, and appreciation, words that you've already heard tonight. Our first event was actually this nature walk with Bob Courtwright, who happens to live in our area. And I think I was the one that started having events because I thought, how are we going to attract people to our group if we don't give them something to do? So next slide, please. So I've been the advocate for having events to build awareness, to educate. I find once people get involved in doing something, they become more engaged, they're more willing to keep coming back and to have a sense of ownership. A lot of people do walk straight through the ravine, but most of them actually want to get involved somehow. So our group really gave them ways they could do that. Next page. So the next few slides just show you some of the activities we've done over the years. So on the left is picking garlic mustard, but we also learned how to turn it into some appetizing dishes at the same time. This middle picture is a fellow from Glen Ames Public School helping to dig out burdock. And on the right is actually one of our nature walks, which was incredibly well attended and probably too many people. But next slide. There's Bob Courtwright again and Jean DeMagala, who's a local historian, and he was the big draw on that nature walk, as he'd already had quite a following. On the right side, Christine ran an event called Ravine Ramblers. So we've attracted nature buffs down to families and children. Next slide. On the left, you can get an idea of how large the oak trees are. Our ravine has quite a lot of 100-year-old oak trees, or older even. And I was listening recently to a talk about how valuable oak trees are for the number of insects and animals that they provide habitat for. And they also provide a great deal of shade, and that's why a lot of people like to come to our ravine. So we've done cleanups. The right side was also part of a cleanup. Next slide. Forest bathing has been mentioned. Cherie ran 5 forest bathing events for us in 2019. So it's really a type of meditation in the woods. Next slide. And one of those was specifically to attract people who might not normally come to the ravine, people with physical impairments, and this group has some developmental delays. They came with their caregivers, and this is our circle at the end. One more slide, please. I think we actually have done very few events in person, but we've continued to try and communicate with people in our group through a number of means that we have, mostly Facebook and Instagram, and we've held a couple of contests. Next slide. So here's one of the posters that was submitted in our poster contest. It's a way to get people to do what we'd like them to do. And I think next slide. And we also had a photo contest. And you can see here that people who use the ravine, or these people have come every season to help with cleanups. They love the Glen Stewart Ravine. They're happy to help, and we try and give them an opportunity to do that. So in the breakout room, I'm available to talk to anything about organizing events or volunteers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cherie. And thank you very much to all the speakers. I really hope that you as attendees got inspired and connected to one of these speakers from tonight. Really try to find people with a diversity of experience, because it really feels like our connection to ravines can be as diverse as our city, right? I hope you all had a really nice time in the breakout rooms and had thought-provoking conversations, inspiration, new ideas. And it was also for me really nice to jump into some of the breakout rooms and see some familiar faces of community organizers and people who are taking care of our parks and ravines. So just a big shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for coming and being interested and just taking care of our community. So to wrap up tonight and wrap up all the amazing presentations from our speakers today, what we're gonna do is just ask each of the presenters, and I think I'll go in the same order as you all presented. If you wanna just share with us one key takeaway that you had from being in your breakout room and sharing that with the rest of the group, and just try and keep it brief. So Mark, we'll start with you.
Okay, we had some great conversation. We were talking about how to minimize some of the threats that the ravines face. And the idea that we kept on coming back to was that through education and sharing the facts on why something is a problem, rather than just kind of illustrating that it's a problem, we may be able to affect change. And also by focusing potentially on younger populations coming up and giving them the facts and explanations.
Thank you, Mark. And now Jenny and then Donna.
Yeah, so for me, I think what the takeaway was that there was a lot of people that were interested in inviting Indigenous individuals or community groups to their ravines to offer teachings and ceremony. And I think the key takeaways are that this is really important work, and it's so exciting to hear that so many of you are interested in it. I think it's really important to note that if you are wanting to reach out to Indigenous people or Indigenous groups, just to do that a little bit of background work to know, what would be the respectful way to do that. So in our group, I just want to touch upon it really quickly, but the idea of potentially offering honorariums, being able to offer tobacco when you're making that request, and being really clear about what your request is so that if the tobacco is taken, that agreement has been made. The other important takeaway is that in doing so, in offering Indigenous programmings in the ravines near you, you are actually implementing the ravine strategy. So there's at least a couple of points in the ravine strategy that actually talk about the importance of having Indigenous programming in the ravines. And I just noted that on Friday, April 16th, the city actually passed a motion to make sure that Indigenous peoples are consulted in the implementation of the Ravine strategy. And this is huge in terms of reconciliation because the ravines make up 17% of our landmass. So it's a great way to really offer incredible, meaningful ways to offer space to do land-based work, which is what Indigenous people are asking for. They want to be able to practice their culture and their ceremonies on land, and the ravines are a perfect place to do that.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Donna, did you want to add anything else? We'll wait to see if you unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Okay. One of the things that I did take away was when someone asked about the invasive indigenous species and how to deal with it. And the other thing was the interest in indigenous events and how to get a hold of to contact people. So there's interest in wanting to do an indigenous events in different places, locations. So that's a good thing.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Donna.
land stewardship. Yeah, right on.
Sorry, were you going to say something about land stewardship? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. No, that was pertaining to land stewardship and, you know, like the programming and events and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And we'll make sure to send after links to, because I know I was in a couple breakout rooms, any links to the different organizations that the presenters are representing tonight. Okay, and then over to Ambika.
Hi. Yeah. So in our group, we talked about the audience. Who is your audience and what is the message you're giving them to engage with them? And lack of awareness came out to be one of the strong points that people said, that people just don't know, like one of those people in the group shared that their parents didn't know that these trails existed, which is what I'm talking about. People don't know, that is why they don't go, and that is why they don't engage. So for people to say that people of color are not interested in looking after our ravines or stewarding them, no. You need to think about how you're reaching out to them, how you're communicating to them, and what are you talking about them. And we discussed about how can you do that. And one of the suggestions that I really liked was getting the elders in the community to come out and speak about how they connected with nature, either here or back in their own communities, because like we talked about, nature is nature, whether it's here or in some other country. And the way we connect to nature as humans should be universal. I don't think that can be very different from how we connect and communicate with nature. So just bringing our own cultural stories and cultural experiences and getting people to talk about it, like listening more than just telling them. So those were the main takeaways, I think, if I've not missed out.
Thank you, Ambika. I'm learning so much even from just this debrief. And over to Dana.
Hi, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here and joining. And I think what I learned is that we all came here tonight for our own different reasons, and that there's a lot of opportunity, even just in very brief snapshots of what other people are doing and working on in the ravines and in their communities. I heard about people trying to connect community groups just to get outside and maybe do a cleanup, but also learn a little bit more about nature. How can we all work together on big projects like City Nature Challenge on April 30th, where we're gonna hopefully have a lot of people trying out iNaturalist, and then maybe some new users who haven't tried that before getting involved when we can collect a lot of data that's really important to help us understand the ecology of the ravines. And then just a lot of enthusiasm. So thanks everybody for enjoying nearby nature.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. And last but not least, Cherie.
Trying to unmute. Thank you, everybody. No, we had nice individual chats, really, and talked about a lot of just nuts and bolts issues that I think the benefit of being part of Park people and this group is having a network where you can ask really specific mundane questions like, how did you do that? And did that work or didn't it work? So we talked about, you know, because we're an ESA, what kind of restrictions might that be? Are people allowed to go off the main trail during your cleanups, or what? We also talked about some ideas of how to do cleanups during COVID, where people just send a photo. I think Floyd's done it too, where they send in a photo of what they've collected, and maybe using students who need volunteer hours, and so they can just tell you they did the cleanup and then you record it, and rather than try to do it all together. So our group has to figure out how we're doing our cleanup. So some of those ideas might get implemented. We also talked just about the 2 online events we'd done, the poster and the photo, and just how we'd promoted them, how we'd given, whether we'd given any prizes or whatever, and whether we have some funding. And I said, we don't really have very much, but we've been lucky enough to get some honorariums, and they cover our printing costs and a few small prizes here and there. I think I also like to just thank, I think it's John Cummings, who, when I was starting out, he told me what to do to get started. And he talked just about being, getting to know your park supervisor and your counselor and meeting with them once a year, and having a good relationship. And the second thing he told me that is valuable is just, you know, a lot of groups do cleanups. It's something that's visible and people feel like they're doing something. And he said that he would go through the ravine maybe once a week or so with a partner, and people would see them doing that and could talk to them about what they're doing and learn more about getting involved. And also they'd walk through a clean ravine, so they wouldn't think, oh, I guess it's okay to toss my coffee cup here. So those were a couple of, if you're getting started, ways to just get started.
Thank you, Cherie. And the Park People has a Park People map where community groups can add themselves to the map. And the idea of that is that it's there so that community groups can find each other and connect with each other to share learnings. And kind of just what Cherie said, that really is helpful at the beginning and even later on when you're exploring what else you want to do or where you want to help a new group that's starting out. So I just wanted to give really a big thank you to all of our speakers, Jenny, Donna, Mark, Ambika, Dana, and Cherie. It's really inspiring. It's made my Wednesday evening a very exciting one. And I think a lot of people here have learned something new and have found good engagement. And hopefully we're all gonna help connect other individuals to our ravines and take care of these beautiful spaces that we're so lucky to have. And so I'm gonna do very quick wrap up and try and do this very quick. It might be hard, but we have some really cool and exciting events coming up as part of Into the Ravines. And so they're part of this event series called TO Ravines with Love. And these events are all done with COVID-19 in mind. So you're mainly joining via Zoom or through like a call-in number so that you can be outside and still engage. And so the one that's coming up earliest is the earliest. You'll see why I left very soon. Dawn Chorus, which is an event that you'll have to wake up a little bit earlier than usual, maybe if you're like me, to get to listen to birds. So Jenny is one of our partners for this event. So Jenny, one reason why I should wake up really early on Saturday, or other people who are not early risers.
Yeah, well, to hear the dawn chorus, we recommend waking up at between 5 and 5:30, and that's like climbing a mountain. So you do the hard work, but when you get to the top, or when you wake up and you hear those birds, that hard work is going to feel like magic. You're not even going to think about the work or the tiredness. You are just going to be thinking about the magic that is the bird song that happens before the sun rises.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. So hopefully we see some of you. Well, we know that we're all out there waking up early on May 2nd. And then we have these other couple events coming up in the month of May. Park People has shared these on our newsletter, and we're also going to share a link on the chat where you can learn more about these upcoming events. The next thing that I wanted to share with you is that for Into the Ravines, then the next slide. We did a whole bunch of different blogs and resources last year. And so one of them that I think is really relevant to today's conversation is on trying to understand how to reduce the impacts and increase our connections to ravine spaces. And for this blog post, we interviewed Carolyn Crawley, Mi'kmaq woman from the East Coast and a forest therapy kind of leader, and Monica from the city of Toronto. And so they have really great perspectives on tips on how to connect with nature while respecting the boundaries and the relationship that you have. So I recommend you check it out. And then also on our website, you can see all these other great resources that we have developed. And then finally,
oh, sorry, can I ask a quick question? That Humber River Black History Walk, is that going to be Zoom, or is that actually a walk?
That's a walk that Jacqueline L. Scott, she wrote a blog about kind of walking in the Humber River and some of the history points of Black people in the Humber River in that area.
So it'll be on the blog.
Yeah, so it's a blog.
Okay, thank you. That'd be
cool. And then the last thing, just encouraging you all to, if you haven't so already, can subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll keep you up to date in all park relevant kind of news and cool events. And then we also have a Facebook group for community park groups where you can engage and connect with each other. So encourage you to join that as well. And that is it. What time is it? 8:02, not too shabby. Thank you, everyone. I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.